Before we begin, I want to do a little channel update. I am working on big videos, quite a few actually. The first being a sort of revamped reading of Tron Legacy, as well as all of the Tron media. And I do mean all. We're covering the Kingdom Hearts worlds, okay?
You know Tron?
Yeah, I've met him and stuff.
It's also going to be a discussion about why we return to past works of art, iteration, and retelling. As well, Jessie Gender and I are going to be doing a series of videos on Star Wars, which will be over on her channel. Lastly, I'm working on animations and editing for a couple of other channels, and as such, I don't know when I'm going to get that big video out to you. With that being said, I will be making some of these short little essays, because they don't take too much time to get completed, and putting those only on the Patreon. I will probably release them to everybody else a couple of months after they've come out as a little essay mixtape, basically. I work on commissions instead of my own videos because I need to. So if I didn't, I would get to spend more time working on videos for this channel, and they would happen more frequently. With that little preamble out of the way, let's ruin every Gen X dad's favorite movie.
From the dawn of time we came, living many secret lives, struggling to reach the time of the gathering.
We're the princes of the
Highlander begins with Queen's Princes of the Universe, a queer song by a queer man, followed by the homoerotic visuals of modern wrestling. We center in on one viewer. He is both here in the present and on a battlefield nearly 500 years ago where people chant for the death of his clan. He is interconnected within times between his past and present, the looming future of the gathering awaiting him.
McLeod.
This man then encounters another man he knows, and they engage in phallic object interaction in an abandoned parking lot in 1980s New York. I didn't say the film was going to be a good queer story, just that it's a queer story. New York at this time was gripped in the AIDS epidemic, and 4 years before the events of the film, queer activists became gay men's health crisis at gatherings. Like The Gathering.
The gathering is here.
The film could have been set in any city, and it has sections in other areas around the world during the past, but it has its sword wielders gather in New York in the 80s during the AIDS epidemic. After this figure defeats Facile in one-on-one combat, we smoothly move from present to past.
Connor!
Is riding with his clan to battle against invading forces. He is pierced by the sword of the Kurgan, a man who in the modern day dresses like a leather daddy. As that self dies, we go through his eyes, his perspective shifting temporality, and return to a New York where its police brutally assaults and arrests Connor. He has the legal name Nash, which the cops use. Connor, staring down a gun, is pulled back to the traumatic experience of his family viewing him as dead for his encounter with the Kurgan sword. A woman grieves for the life she will not have with him due to this event. Back in New York, the pigs examine the crime scene and we meet a CSI who is knowledgeable about swords, who connects Nash to the killing by finding Facile's blade.
A Toledo Salamanca.
Her name is Brenda. Content warning F slur.
You a faggot, Nash?
The officer spits it out using his legal name, but not his actual name.
I'll tell you what happened, Russell. You went down to the garage for a blowjob.
Oh, it's not even subtext anymore. The film explicitly draws a parallel between sword fights and gay sex. The metaphor is in the text. Also, everyone cheers when Nash beats up a cop after the cop tries to assault him for being gay. We then see the Kurgan's modern-day introduction, where he's garbed in a leather daddy outfit blaring "Gimme the Prize" by Queen, which includes the lyric, "Give me your kings. Let me squeeze them in my hands, your puny princes." This is Freddie Mercury doing a very straight thing where he squeezes other men, you know? The straight squeezing that straight people do. He then prepares his sword in a seedy motel. Connor goes back to get his sword and Brenda almost catches him. He follows her to find out what she knows until the Kurgan attacks.
Nice to see you again, McLeod. Nice to see you again.
Ah yes, the traditional greeting for a sworn enemy. After the police interrupt their rendezvous,
Another time, Highlander.
Connor tries to protect Brenda by discouraging her from interacting with him.
You only have one life. You value it. Go home.
We then return to the past.
I say he's got the devil in him.
His family casts him out while brutally assaulting him, many of them wishing to burn him at the stake,
He should have died.
only being stopped by one person showing him kindness.
There'll be no bonding here today!
Because there's nothing queer at all about any of that. Connor eventually found love, and they are interrupted one day by Sean Connery.
What do you want?
You.
Nothing gay here at all, whatsoever. Zero gay. Anyway, Connor tells his wife,
Go in the house.
and Connery explains,
The sensation you're feeling is the quickening.
but more importantly, he states,
We are the same, MacLeod.
in the future, MacLeod cleans his sword and is reminded fondly of his time with Sean Connery. I wonder what that means.
You should wash your hands, you dirty pig.
He remembers how Sean taught him about his body and the ways of life. End of the sword.
What I do know is that because you were born different, men will fear you, try to drive you away. You must learn to conceal your special gift.
Ah, yes. What could be queer about, being born different but not realizing it right away, and people wrongly fear you for this, and your family that's biological, they disown you, and so you end up meeting someone with the same identity, and they, teach you about yourself and the world, and you form like a family by choice, like a chosen family, if you will. And then, you live together, and it's just a straight backstory that straight people have. There is a deep joy in their communal connection, and, well, this shot says a lot on its own.
What I want is a family.
You cannot have a family. We cannot have children.
Of course. The very allo-cis hetero problem of wanting a family, but just not being able to have them because of what you are. Just so not queer. A high-key allo-cis heteronormative of you.
You must leave her, brother.
Connery tries to save Connor from pain by encouraging him to abandon his wife, because she will die slowly and he will live on, but he refuses, so they stay where they are, and due to this, the Kurgan finds them while Connor is away. He battles and defeats Connery after piercing him from behind with a sword. And then things happen. And the film is kind enough and smart enough to not force the audience to hear or see that. They just imply that it happened later on in dialogue. And I know this is going to be a shock to a lot of cis-het men who make stories based on what I keep seeing from y'all, but you don't actually have to depict sexual violence against women or anyone. It doesn't need triggering visuals in order to have a conversation about this topic. And often when you try to, it ends up coming across as fetishistic, which isn't the best look when people like you keep actually sexually assaulting people. Just some food for thought when you're writing. All you need to understand is that the Kurgan is less a character and more an embodiment of sexual violence and objectification, which, yes, has problems in that the leather kink character is demonized. That being said, this is an R-rated film from the 80s that doesn't show the sexual violence towards women, doesn't treat her badly after that happens, and actively makes people who are homophobic the villains. Like, the bar is in hell for films from this period, and Highlander shockingly holds up to a degree. Brenda meets Rachel, who works at Connor's antique store, because Brenda is trying to investigate Connor, and we find out that Rachel is Connor's adoptive Jewish daughter he saved from the Nazis during World War II.
Whatever you say, Jack. You're the master race.
This film really does say, shoot Nazis and punch cops. Connor's romances with both Heather and Brenda are fundamentally taboo love to some degree in the structure of the film, and yet Connor loves anyway.
You must leave her, brother.
Connor's romance with Heather has a deep connection to the experience of queer people in the 80s, in the aspect of watching their loved one fade away, wishing they could live longer together.
I want to stay with you. Forever.
I want that too.
Connor holds Heather in her last moments and says goodbye with a memory of their love.
Good night, my buddy Heather.
Back in the modern day, Connor meets with one of his past partners, soon the Castigar. They still hold a great deal of fondness for each other. Queer people being friends with their exes is so common that it's a meme online. So while I was editing, I found a research paper that actually demonstrates that this is very statistically significantly common. So, yeah, queer people are just better at relationships.
When exactly was that?
It was 1783.
They reminisce together. They remember a duel where once again explicit queerness is interconnected with sword fighting.
Thank you, Hotchkiss.
Then the Kurgan's directly called kinky.
How'd you like Candy? She said you were kinda kinky, huh?
I know writers who use subtext and they're all cowards.
A far-right creep catches Sunda and the Kurgan clashing swords in a back alley and pulls a gun on them. The Kurgan kills Connor's partner, and look, he does this. If you have not gotten the innuendo yet, Highlander's kind of metaphorically about sex. All the sword fights are about sex, that's what it's about. And as a sex-repulsed ace, I don't super love having to talk about, phallic symbolism, but it's kind of a core element of the text, and a lot of the reading naturally comes out of that, so I have to at least acknowledge it with terrible jokes.
Please let me touch it. It's so big.
Back in the film, the Kurgan terrifies an old Christian woman, calling her Mom. There's also this moment.
After he threw me against the wall with his body.
Again, I don't like having to go super deep on that topic, but the Kurgan is a representation of sexual violence, and he's also kind of a personification of an STD. Considering characters who get close to Connor are then hurt by the Kurgan specifically, it kind of deepens this meaning, and it's important to understand that the Kurgan is the villain because he represents sexual violence, and he is explicitly and constantly shown as being very different from the rest of the mortals, as having no form of community with them. I noticed this while editing, but the scene also cuts away from letting us hear what the man has to say in the same way that the film cuts away from the scene where there's implied essay against Heather. And that parallel just feels a little too purposeful, considering that type of cutting away doesn't happen anywhere else. Brenda researches Nash's birth and finds his past lives and uses an image recognition algorithm to determine that they are all the same person. What they show on the computer just wouldn't have been possible in the 80s. And that concludes my, I'm a computer scientist that knows a lot about machine learning nitpick of the film. Connor and the Kurgan meet in a church, which is
holy ground, Highlander.
You are safe only on holy ground.
The Kurgan goads Connor.
Castigar is gone. Only you and I remain.
I think it's interesting how these two characters' masculinity is so juxtaposed. Connor is still very masculine, but he's supportive and emotionally open. He is soft when needed, and he doesn't feel the need to compensate, unlike the heteronormative negative masculine figures around him. The Kurgan, on the other hand, is all compensation. That man screams, "Please validate that I'm a big man." And I think their two swords represents these juxtaposed masculinities. Connor's is subtle, skillful, connected to community, and incredibly strong, shown in the katana he uses, whose durability is emphasized multiple times and which came from his friend Sean Connery, whereas the Kurgan uses the biggest fucking sword he can get. But it's not sturdy, it's literally held together with rivets, and it just screams, "I'm massively compensating for my fragile sense of masculinity." Again, this film's doing a lot of phallic symbolism.
Let yourself feel the stack. Never overextend your thrust.
When Connor reveals what he is to Brenda,
I am Connor MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod.
He tells her his real name, and he asks her to pierce him with a blade.
And I am immortal.
This coming out then leads to a sex scene, once again showing that the film is treating touching someone with a blade and sex as equivalent. The Kurgan kidnaps Brenda to affect Connor. There's a drawn-out battle where Brenda saves Connor, giving him the upper hand, and he defeats the Kurgan, becoming the one, and gaining the prize.
There can be only one.
The prize allows him to give others understanding and empathy, and he gets to live peacefully with the person he loves.
You know what's weird? Most people are afraid to die. You're afraid to live.
Anyways, now's as good a time as any to mention that my dead name is Connor, and that I was, in part, accidentally named after this film, which is a big metaphor for the AIDS epidemic. To be fair to my dad, he wouldn't have known that. He just picked the name from my mom's list of Irish names because he really likes this film. But it's also objectively hilarious. My dead name never really felt like it was mine, probably because I'm a trans lesbian, but also because my best friend had the exact same name because his dad liked Highlander. If you were born in 1998, assigned male at birth, and your dad liked Highlander, you were named Connor. Those were the rules. There was 3 other kids in my grade with the same name for the same reason. So I have always felt a connection to this movie. It's interesting to me because this film has changed its meaning so much over time, just like my relationship with that name. Originally, it was this thing of connection and going, oh, I'm named after this badass. But then it really elucidated to me that I didn't relate to that name, that I didn't relate to being a man, that I wasn't a man, and I didn't want to be called something that came from a man. And now, after doing this reading, I get to kind of reclaim it for myself. That being said, the film has issues. There's misogynistic lines.
I'll stay right here.
Do as I say, woman.
Women are generally used mostly in service of Connor's character arc. The one main cast BIPOC character is barely on screen. And while it's definitely applicable to a reading involving queerness and AIDS, it's a messy metaphor that mixes violence and gay sex in not great ways. But I still like it, even if I can't necessarily recommend it to everyone. It's very mid-budget 80s in quality, it's cheesy, the line deliveries are unintentionally hilarious.
Tell me, how did it happen, for God's sake?
But I love it for its jank. Where else would you get these wild editing choices? The unique, dreamlike quality, and silly action scenes and performances that make you laugh unintentionally and then still somehow feel things.
You're at one with all living things.
Recontextualizes the entire meaning of the film's central statement.
There can be only one.
Which comes to represent not the aggrandizement of an individual, but the oneness of a connected, empathetic, and understanding communal comprehension.
Don't you ever follow me again. You only have one life. If you value it, go home.
Connor loving people puts them and himself in danger throughout the film. Not because of him, but because of patriarchal Christian viewpoints and because of violence from others like the Kurgan. He is forced to watch those he loved pass on without being able to save them. He is a character defined by a want to love and to be loved, and by the trauma he experiences from others for doing so. But he doesn't give up on connection. Earlier in the film, he experiences deep sorrow at not having a family, and then forms one later with Rachel. And I like that she's the one who encourages him to love again because she recognizes that her dad's lonely.
How about loneliness?
I'm not lonely. I'm like you, I'm alone. Come with me, Rachel. I've got everything I need right here.
Oh, no, you don't.
When Connor goes to fight the Kurgan, he thinks he's going to die.
There's a power of attorney for you. You'll have everything you need.
So he says goodbye to Rachel first, and it ruins me.
Sweet Rachel, you always knew this would happen. Russell Nash dies tonight.
I have a lot of feelings about my traumatized queer himbo and his adopted daughter that he took in because he knew what it was like to lose those he loved and be left alone in the world. Because this movie's about how connecting with other people matters. That we need to love even if the world feels like it is full of hatred and anger and doesn't accept you for what you are. At the end of the film, Connor, whose former husband and wife died and who has let his grief over them get in the way of forming new bonds, gets the blessing of his husband from beyond the grave to live a happy life with his new partner. It even has a montage of happy memories between Connery and Connor while this happens.
In the years to come, will you light a candle and remember me on my birthday?
There's a Jewish saying I like. May their memory be a blessing. I love that the film helps Connor get to that point.
Hey, it's a kind of magic.
Goodbye, Russell Nash.
So that's my very queer reading of Highlander. It's an imperfect and at times nearly offensive metaphor, and yet is inextricable from that. And I think for me at least, still has a place in my heart. It's funny how there is, as far as I know, only one Aronach, because while Connor no longer applies to me, there can only be one. Does. Though, if anyone copies my name, I will be forced to track you down, battle you in a one-on-one sword duel, because, you know, those are the rules, and you should have known better. And I will win. Yes, I'm actually ending the video that way. Okay, bye!